When the town looked away, a woman beaten in the street, a town that turned its back, and the one man who refused to let her die alone. Before we begin, if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. And if this story moves you, don't forget to hit that like button. Now, let's step back to 1871, to a dusty Texas town where mercy was rarer than water, and one woman's survival would change two broken lives forever. The dust tasted like iron. Elena Moore couldn't tell anymore if it was the dirt or the blood filling her mouth. Her cheek pressed against the street, rough planks biting into her skin, and somewhere above her a man was still talking. His voice carried the smooth certainty of someone who'd never been told no, never been stopped, never been made to answer for anything he'd done. "You see what happens," he said, loud enough for the whole town to hear, "when a woman forgets her place?" She couldn't see him, couldn't see much of anything except the warped grain of the boardwalk 6 inches from her nose and the dark spots spreading beneath her face. Her ribs screamed with every shallow breath. Her left eye had swollen shut. Somewhere during the beating she'd bitten through her lower lip, and now the split flesh throbbed in rhythm with her pulse. The September sun beat down on the back of her neck. Dry heat, merciless heat, the kind that baked the moisture from your skin and left you hollow. She'd stopped trying to get up after the third kick. "Anybody got something to say?" The man's boots appeared in her narrowing field of vision, expensive leather, polished despite the dust. Town boots. Rich man's boots. "Anybody here think this whore deserves better than she got?" Silence answered him. Not the silence of an empty street, but the thick, deliberate quiet of people who were there, watching, choosing to say nothing. Elena had lived in Stillwater, Texas for 11 months, long enough to learn that silence was its own kind of violence. Her husband had been dead for 10 of those months. Daniel Moore had arrived in Stillwater with dreams of building something, a mercantile, a life, a future for the wife he'd married back in Georgia before the war turned the world inside out. He'd been gentle and optimistic, traits that proved fatal in a town built on harder foundations. 3 weeks after they'd opened their small dry goods store, he'd confronted the wrong men about a debt they owed. They'd beaten him in the street, much like they were beating Elena now, and left him with injuries that turned septic in the unforgiving heat. He'd died holding her hand, apologizing for bringing her to this place. The store had gone to creditors within a month. Everything they'd owned, sold off, or seized. Elena had been left with nothing but the clothes she wore and a town that looked at widows the way vultures looked at dying cattle, as something to be circled, waited out, and eventually picked clean. She'd tried to find work, tried sewing, laundry, cooking. But Stillwater wasn't the kind of place that made room for women without men to speak for them. The respectable families didn't want her near their homes. The saloon owners wanted her for things she wouldn't do. And the men with money and power, men like Clayton Voss, whose boots now stood inches from her bleeding face, they wanted her to understand that a woman alone was a woman who belonged to whoever took her first. She'd told him no. She'd told him no when he'd cornered her behind the general store. Told him no when he'd offered her money to keep him company in the rooms above the saloon he owned. Told him no when he'd grabbed her wrist and told her she didn't have a choice. And she'd slapped him when he'd tried to kiss her anyway. That had been 2 hours ago. He'd left her there that first time, his face red with rage and something darker, and she'd thought maybe that was the end of it. She'd been stupid enough to hope. But Clayton Voss didn't forgive. And Clayton Voss didn't forget. He'd found her an hour later walking toward the boarding house where she'd been staying on credit she couldn't pay. He'd been with 3 other men, friends, employees, it didn't matter. They all wore the same expression of casual cruelty, the look of men about to do something terrible and knowing no one would stop them. She'd tried to run, hadn't made it 10 feet. They'd dragged her into the middle of Main Street in broad daylight, and Clayton Voss had made a spectacle of it. He'd announced her crimes to anyone within earshot, that she was a prostitute, a thief, that she'd tried to steal from him and then struck him when he'd confronted her. All lies, but lies delivered with the confidence of a man who knew his word outweighed hers 1,000 to 1. Then he'd hit her. The first blow had come open-handed across her face, hard enough to snap her head sideways and fill her mouth with blood. The second had been a fist to her stomach that folded her in half and sent her to her knees. After that, it had become a blur of boots and fists and pain, while Clayton Voss narrated her punishment like a preacher delivering a sermon. And the town had watched. She could feel them now, a presence at the edges of her fading consciousness. Shopkeepers in doorways, women clutching their children, cowboys leaning against hitching posts, all of them witnesses, all of them silent. "Get up," Clayton said above her. His voice had lost some of its theatrical quality. Now he just sounded annoyed, like she was a dog that wouldn't learn its lesson. "Get up so we can finish this proper." She didn't move. Couldn't move. Her body had stopped obeying her somewhere around the fourth or fifth kick to her ribs. "I said get up." A boot connected with her shoulder, rolling her partially onto her back. The sky wheeled above her, bleached white with heat and too bright to look at. She closed her good eye and waited for the next blow. It didn't come. Instead, she heard something new. The jingle of a bridle, the heavy footfall of a horse walking up the street, and then a voice, low and rough, shaped by years of dust and distance. "That's enough." The words cut through the hot air like a blade through fabric. Simple, absolute, the kind of statement that didn't invite discussion. Elena forced her eye open, squinting against the glare. A man sat on a big bay horse at the edge of the crowd, maybe 20 feet from where she lay bleeding in the dirt. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, wearing clothes that had seen hard use and harder country. His hat sat low on his brow, casting his face in shadow, but she could see his eyes, gray as winter sky and just as cold. He was looking at Clayton Voss the way a man might look at a snake he was deciding whether to shoot. Clayton turned, and Elena saw his expression shift. Irritation gave way to something more careful, more calculated. He knew this man, and whatever he knew, it made him think before he spoke. "This isn't your concern, Rowan." Rowan. The name meant nothing to Elena, but it clearly meant something to Clayton, and to the crowd. She felt the quality of the silence change, tension replacing indifference. "Seems like it is," the man called Rowan said. He hadn't raised his voice, but somehow it carried anyway. "Seems like you're beating a woman in the street and calling it justice." "This is town business, legal business." Clayton's hand had drifted to his belt, not quite touching the pistol holstered there, but close. "She's a thief and a whore, and she struck me, under territorial law. Under any law worth a damn, you're a coward and a liar." The crowd drew breath as one. Clayton's face went dark red. "You better watch your mouth, Rowan. You don't have the reputation you used to. You're just another rancher now, and not even a successful one. You've got no authority here." "Don't need authority to stop a beating." Rowan shifted slightly in his saddle, and the movement made his coat fall open just enough to reveal the revolver on his hip. "Not a threat exactly, just a fact. Don't need permission to call a thing what it is." "You making this your fight?" "Already is my fight." Rowan's gaze dropped to Elena for the first time, and something flickered in those cold eyes. Not pity, something harder than that. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who'd seen this scene before and hated what it said about the world. "Soon as I rode into town and saw you kicking a woman half to death while grown men stood around watching." Clayton laughed, but it sounded forced. "So what? You gonna take her, make her your problem, if that's what it takes? She's nothing, Rowan. No family, no money, no use to anyone. You want to waste your time on a dead woman walking, that's your funeral." "Then we're done here." Rowan dismounted in one smooth motion, landing light despite his size. He crossed the space between them with the rolling gait of a man who'd spent more time on horseback than on foot, and he didn't stop until he stood between Clayton and Elena. "You got something else to say. Say it now. Otherwise, step back." For a long moment, Clayton didn't move. His hand hovered near his gun, and Elena could see him weighing his options, could see the calculations running behind his eyes, reputation, risk, witnesses. Finally, his hand dropped. "She's yours then. Your problem. Don't come crying when she steals from you or spreads her legs for someone with deeper pockets." "Get out of my sight," Rowan said quietly, "before I stop being polite." Clayton opened his mouth, thought better of it, and turned on his heel. His men followed, and the crowd began to disperse, quickly, quietly, like people who just remembered they had somewhere else to be. Within a minute, the street was empty except for Elena and the stranger standing over her. Rowan knelt beside her, moving slowly, keeping his hands visible. Up close, she could see his face clearly for the first time. He was older than she'd thought, maybe 40, maybe more. His face was weathered and hard, carved by sun and wind and years of living rough. A scar ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. His jaw was dark with several days of stubble, but his eyes, when they met hers, held something she hadn't expected. Kindness. "Can you hear me?" he asked. She managed a small nod, the movement sending fresh spikes of pain through her skull. "Good. That's good." He pulled off his bandana and pressed it gently against the worst of the bleeding on her face. "I'm going to get you out of here, get you somewhere safe. Can you stand?" "Don't. No," she whispered. Her voice came out broken and raw. "That's all right. We'll figure it out." He slipped one arm under her shoulders, the other beneath her knees, and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. "I've got you. You're going to be all right." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that kindness in his eyes, that certainty in his voice. But trust was a luxury she'd lost months ago, and belief had died with her husband in a rented room that stank of sickness and failure. "Why?" she managed to ask as he carried her toward his horse. "Why? Help me." Rowan looked down at her, and for just a moment, she saw something break through that weathered exterior. Something that looked like pain, like memory. "Because nobody helped someone I loved once," he said quietly, "and I've regretted it every day since." He settled her carefully onto his horse, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her steady against his chest, and she felt the solid warmth of him at her back. Felt safe for the first time in so long she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. "Where are you taking me?" she asked as he turned the horse away from town. "My ranch. It's about an hour's ride. You can rest there, heal there. And when you're ready, we'll figure out what comes next." "I can't pay you. Didn't ask you to." He nudged the horse into a slow walk, mindful of her injuries. "All I'm asking is that you hold on and don't die on me. Think you can do that?" She didn't answer, couldn't promise something she wasn't sure was in her power to give, but she leaned back against him and closed her eye and let herself be carried away from Stillwater, from the town that had watched her die, from the life that had beaten her down and left her bleeding in the dust. Behind them, the town grew smaller. Ahead, the hills rose brown and endless under the white-hot sky. And between them, a woman who'd lost everything and a man who'd stopped running from his ghosts rode toward something neither of them could yet name, but both of them desperately needed: a second chance. The ride passed in fragments. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of motion and heat and pain, but nothing solid enough to hold on to. Once, she surfaced enough to realize the sun had shifted, that they were climbing now into rougher country where the air smelled of cedar and dry grass. Another time, she felt water against her lips and drank without opening her eyes, trusting the hand that held the canteen. Mostly, she just hurt. Every jolt of the horse's gait sent fresh agony through her ribs. Her face throbbed, her head pounded, and beneath it all ran a deeper pain, the kind that couldn't be blamed on fists or boots. The pain of knowing she'd been alone in that street, that no one had cared, that if this man hadn't happened along, she would have died there and been forgotten before sunset. "Almost there," Rowan said at one point, his voice a low rumble against her back. "Just a little further." She didn't respond, didn't have the strength. When they finally stopped, she felt him dismount and lift her down with the same careful strength he'd shown in town. She forced her eye open and saw a house, simple, sturdy, built from rough-cut timber with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Beyond it, a barn and several outbuildings. Corrals holding horses. The bones of a working ranch, though one that looked like it had seen better days. "I know it's not much," Rowan said, carrying her toward the house. "But it's solid, and it's safe." He pushed through the front door into a large main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space all in one. The furniture was plain but well made. Everything was clean but sparse, like a place where someone lived but didn't quite inhabit. He carried her to a bedroom off the main room and laid her on a narrow bed with surprising gentleness. "I'm going to check your injuries," he said, lighting a lamp against the gathering dusk. "Some of them are going to need tending. I'll be as careful as I can, but it's going to hurt. Already hurts, she managed. I know. I'm sorry. He pulled a chair next to the bed and sat, then began carefully examining her face. His hands were rough with calluses, but gentle in their touch, and his expression remained neutral as he catalogued the damage. Broken cheekbone, maybe. Your eyes swollen shut, but I don't think there's permanent damage. Split lip's going to heal on its own. Your ribs are the bigger problem. He moved his attention lower, carefully probing through her dress at the places where Clayton's boots had connected. Each touch made her gasp, but he didn't stop until he'd checked every injury. At least 2 broken ribs, he said finally. Maybe 3. Nothing I can do about those except wrap them tight and tell you not to move much for the next few weeks. They'll heal, but they'll hurt like hell while they do. Everything hurts, she whispered. I know. He stood and crossed to a cabinet, returning with clean cloth, a basin of water, and a bottle of whiskey. This is going to hurt worse, but we need to get you cleaned up and those ribs wrapped, or you're going to heal wrong. For the next hour, Elena existed in a haze of pain, punctuated by moments of sharp, brilliant agony. Rowan worked with methodical efficiency, cleaning her wounds, wrapping her ribs, tending to every injury with the practiced ease of someone who'd done field medicine before. He offered her the whiskey twice, and both times she drank, coughing at the burn but grateful for the warmth that followed. When he was finally done, he covered her with a blanket and stood looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You should sleep now, he said. Tomorrow's going to be hard. You'll need your strength. Why are you doing this? The question came out barely above a whisper, but she had to ask, had to understand. You don't know me. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. I had a wife once, and a daughter. We lived in Kansas, had a farm. Not much, but it was ours. He sat back down in the chair, his hands clasped between his knees. There was a man in town, wealthy, connected, mean as a snake. He wanted our land, made us our offers. We said no. One day he and his men came while I was out checking fences. When I got back, he stopped, his jaw working. They'd burned the house, killed them both. My wife, she tried to stop them, tried to protect our daughter. The whole town knew who'd done it. But he had money and friends and lawyers, and I was just a farmer with a temper and no proof. No one would testify. No one would help. He walked free. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, though she couldn't remember starting to cry. I hunted him for 3 years, Rowan continued, finally caught up to him in Colorado, put a bullet in him, and watched him die. Then I ran. Changed my name, came to Texas, bought this land with money I'd saved from before. Built this place thinking I could leave it all behind. But you can't outrun what you've done. Can't outrun what you've lost. He looked at her then, and she saw the truth of it in his eyes. The guilt, the rage, the hollowness that came from surviving when everyone you loved was gone. When I saw you in that street, he said quietly, I saw my wife, saw her dying while people watched and did nothing, and I knew I couldn't let it happen again, couldn't be one of the people who looked away. I'm sorry, Elena whispered, for what happened to you. And I'm sorry for what happened to you. He stood moving toward the door. Get some rest. I'll be in the next room if you need anything. Rowan? He paused in the doorway. Thank you, she said, for stopping, for helping me, for seeing me. He nodded once, sharp and brief, then left the room and closed the door softly behind him. Elena lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling around her. Somewhere outside, a horse nickered. Wind sighed through the eaves, and in the main room she could hear the creak of a chair as Rowan sat down, keeping watch. She should have been afraid, should have questioned his motives, doubted his kindness, prepared herself to run at the first sign of danger, but she was too tired for fear, too broken for doubt. So instead, she closed her eye and let sleep take her, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream of dying alone in the dust. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Elena woke slowly, swimming up through layers of pain toward consciousness. Every part of her body screamed protest when she tried to move, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then it came back. The beating, the stranger, the ride. She forced her eyes open, both of them this time, though the left was still swollen nearly shut, and found herself in the small bedroom, morning light filtering through simple curtains. Someone had left a glass of water on the table beside the bed, along with a clean dress that wasn't hers. The door was open, and she could see into the main room where Rowan stood at the stove, his back to her, cooking something that made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The movement sent white-hot pain through her ribs, and she couldn't suppress a gasp. Rowan turned immediately, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "Easy," he said, his hand steadying her shoulders. "Don't try to move too fast. Those ribs need time." "I need to use the privy," she said, hating how weak her voice sounded. "I'll help you." He supported most of her weight as she stood, and together they made the slow, agonizing journey outside to the small building behind the house. He waited at a respectful distance, then helped her back inside and into a chair at the table. "How do you feel?" he asked, returning to the stove. "Like I was beaten in the street," she said, then added, "Sorry, that was honest." He glanced over his shoulder with something that might have been a smile. "And accurate. You're going to feel like hell for a while, but you're alive, and you're going to stay that way." He brought her a plate of eggs and bacon, along with fresh coffee. She ate slowly, each bite an exercise in pain management, but the food was good, and she was hungrier than she'd realized. "The dress," she said between bites. "Where did it come from?" "It was my wife's." He said it matter-of-factly, without emotion. "Been in a trunk for 8 years. Figured she'd want someone to get use out of it." Elena looked down at the simple cotton fabric. It was plain, practical, the kind of dress a frontier woman would wear for everyday work. "Thank you. I'll take care of it." "It's yours." Everything she had is just gathering dust anyway. They ate in silence for a while, and Elena found herself studying him in the morning light. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much. His hair was dark brown going gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes spoke of years spent squinting into sun and distance. He moved with the efficient economy of someone who'd learned not to waste energy on unnecessary motion. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Rowan set down his coffee. "That depends on you. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need to heal. After that, if you want to move on, I'll give you money and provisions for wherever you want to go. Or if you want to stay, I could use help around the place. I run cattle, but I'm doing most of the work myself. Could use someone to help with the house, the cooking, the 1,000 other things that need doing on a ranch." "You'd pay me?" "Room, board, and wages. Same as I'd pay any hand." Elena looked around the simple room, then back at him. "Why would you do that? You don't know anything about me." "I know you stood up to Clayton Voss. That takes courage." He met her eyes steadily. "And I know you didn't deserve what happened to you. That's enough." What if he comes looking for me?" "Then he'll deal with me." There was no bravado in the statement, just fact. "And if he's smart, he won't. Clayton's a bully, but he's not stupid. He knows I'm not someone he wants to push." "Because of Kansas? Because of what you did?" Rowan's expression hardened. "Because I've got nothing left to lose. That makes me dangerous in ways money and influence can't match." Elena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. She should be afraid of this man, this stranger who'd killed before and admitted it without shame. Should be planning her escape as soon as she was strong enough. But looking at him now, seeing the grief he carried like a physical weight, she understood something fundamental. Caleb Rowan wasn't dangerous to her. He was dangerous for hers, and that made all the difference. "I'd like to stay," she said quietly. "If the offer's real." "It's real." "Then I accept, and I'll earn my keep. As soon as I'm able, "You'll heal first," he interrupted. "Then we'll talk about work. Right now, your only job is getting better." "I'm not used to being useless." "You're not useless. You're hurt. There's a difference." He stood, gathering the plates. "I need to check on the cattle today. I'll be gone most of the afternoon. You should rest. There's food in the cabinet if you get hungry, and water in the pitcher. Don't try to do anything stupid like cleaning or cooking. Just rest." You sound like you're used to giving orders, she said, a hint of challenge in her voice. He almost smiled. I'm used to people not listening to them, but I'm asking anyway. After he left, Elena sat at the table watching through the window as he saddled his horse and rode out toward the distant hills. The ranch spread around her in all directions, rough, dry country that would break anyone who wasn't tough enough to break it first. But there was a stark beauty to it, too. The way the morning light painted the hills gold, the way the wind moved through the grass like water, the sense of space, of distance from everything that had hurt her. She thought about Clayton Voss, about Stillwater, about the life she'd tried to build there and watched crumble. Part of her wanted to feel angry, to rage against the injustice of it all. But mostly she just felt tired. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something else too. Hope. Small, fragile, barely there, but real. She stood carefully, every movement measured against her injuries, and made her way back to the bedroom. The bed called to her, and she didn't fight it. She lay down, pulled the blanket over herself, and let sleep take her again. Outside, the wind sang through the eaves. And somewhere in the hills, a lone rider pushed deeper into the wilderness, carrying his ghosts with him, like old friends he couldn't quite leave behind. Elena healed slowly. The first week passed in a blur of sleep and pain, her body demanding rest while it knit itself back together. Rowan kept his distance, respectful of her space, but he was always there when she needed him, helping her walk, bringing her meals, changing the dressing on her worst wounds. He didn't talk much, and she was grateful for that. Silence was easier than conversation, less demanding than trying to explain herself or her past or what she'd become in Stillwater. But gradually, as her strength returned, they began to share more than just space. It started small, questions about the ranch, about the work that needed doing. She learned that Rowan ran about 200 head of cattle on land that could have supported twice that many, that he did most of the work himself, riding fence line and checking water and moving the herd as the seasons demanded, that he'd built this place with his own hands, every board and beam and nail, trying to create something solid enough to hold back his grief. Why cattle? She asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills purple and gold. Seemed like honest work, he said, something that needed doing, and cows don't care about your past or what you've done. They just care if you feed them and keep them safe. Is that what you wanted? Something that didn't care? He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe at first. Now, I don't know. Maybe I just wanted something I could keep alive. The honesty of it struck her. She thought about her own losses, her own failures, about Daniel dying in her arms, apologizing for dreams that had turned to dust, about the months after, when she'd tried so hard to survive and found nothing but closed doors and cruel hands. I couldn't keep anything alive either, she said softly. My husband, my marriage, even myself almost. But you're here now. That counts for something. Does it? Or am I just postponing the inevitable? Rowan turned to look at her, and his eyes held that same fierce certainty she'd seen in Stillwater. You survived something that should have killed you. That's not nothing. And what you do with that survival, that's up to you. But don't mistake staying alive for giving up. They're not the same thing. By the second week, Elena was strong enough to help around the house. She started small, washing dishes, sweeping floors, preparing simple meals. Rowan protested at first, but she insisted. You said I could earn my keep, she reminded him. Let me start earning it. You're still healing. I'm always going to be healing from something, she said. Might as well be useful while I do it. He relented, and she threw herself into the work with quiet determination. The house had been neglected, not dirty but lifeless, and she slowly began to bring warmth back into it. Curtains were washed and rehung. Floors were scrubbed. The kitchen was organized and stocked properly. Rowan watched these transformations with something like wonder, as if he'd forgotten a house could be more than just shelter. It's starting to look like a home, he said one afternoon, surprising her. It is a home, she corrected gently. It just needed someone to remember that. The third week brought the first real test. Elena had been hanging laundry on the line behind the house, moving carefully but with growing confidence when she heard horses approaching. Her hand stilled on the wet fabric, her heart suddenly hammering against her healing ribs. She'd been so focused on recovery, on the quiet rhythm of ranch life, that she'd almost let herself forget there was a world beyond these hills, a world that might come looking. She stepped around the corner of the house and saw 3 riders coming up the long drive. Not Clayton Voss. She would have recognized his expensive horse and arrogant bearing, but strangers were almost as dangerous out here, and she felt fear climb up her throat like bile. Rowan emerged from the barn, a shovel still in his hand. He didn't hurry, didn't show alarm, but Elena could see the way his body changed, the subtle shift in his posture, the alertness in his movements. He set the shovel against the barn wall, within easy reach, and walked out to meet the riders. Elena stayed where she was, half hidden by the house, watching. The lead rider was a large man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. The other 2 wore no marks of authority, but they carried themselves like men comfortable with violence. Cowboys, maybe, or something harder. "Caleb Rowan," the sheriff said, reining in his horse. His voice carried easily across the yard. "Been a while." "Sheriff Marcus." Rowan's tone was neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. "What brings you out this way?" "Had some questions about a woman. Heard you took someone from Stillwater a couple weeks back." Elena's breath caught. "What's your interest?" Rowan asked. "Clayton Voss filed a complaint. Says you took a woman who stole from him. Says he wants her returned to face justice." "Clayton Voss is a liar." Rowan said it flatly, without heat. "The woman didn't steal anything. He beat her half to death in the street because she wouldn't spread her legs for him. I stopped him from finishing the job." Sheriff Marcus shifted in his saddle. "That your version?" "That's the truth. You want another version? Go ask the 50 people who stood and watched it happen." "Already did. Funny thing, nobody seems to remember it quite the way you tell it." "Funny thing about memory," Rowan said, "it gets real selective when a rich man's asking the questions." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You always did have a mouth on you, Rowan. Got you in trouble before, as I recall." "I recall different. I recall getting in trouble for killing a man who needed killing. That still bother you?" "What bothers me is you thinking you're above the law. Law didn't help my wife. Law didn't help my daughter. Law stood aside and let them burn." Rowan's voice had gone cold, and Elena saw the sheriff's men shift nervously in their saddles. "So don't talk to me about law like it's something sacred. It's just another tool, and like any tool, it's only as good as the man using it. That's dangerous talk. It's honest talk. Now you going to tell me what you really want, or are we going to keep dancing?" Sheriff Marcus looked past Rowan toward the house, and Elena knew he'd spotted her. She forced herself to stand still, to meet his gaze without flinching. "That her?" he asked. "That's Elena Moore. She works for me." "Voss says her name's Elena, all right. Says she's a prostitute and a thief." "Voss says a lot of things. Most of them are lies designed to cover up what he is, a man who thinks money gives him the right to hurt anyone weaker than him." "You willing to swear to that?" "In front of God and anyone who wants to listen." Rowan took a step forward, and something in the movement made all 3 horses dance nervously. "But here's what I'm not willing to do, Sheriff. I'm not willing to let you take her. She stays here, under my protection, until she decides otherwise, and anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with me directly." The threat hung in the air between them, unmistakable. Sheriff Marcus studied Rowan for a long moment, and Elena could see him weighing options. Finally, he turned to look at her directly. "Ma'am," he called out, "you staying here of your own free will?" Elena's throat was dry, but she found her voice. "Yes? He treating you right?" "Better than anyone in Stillwater ever did." The sheriff nodded slowly, then turned back to Rowan. "Voss isn't going to like this." "Don't much care what Voss likes. He's got friends, influence. He's got money and meanness. Neither one impresses me." "You're making an enemy, Rowan." "Wouldn't be the first time." Rowan's hand hadn't moved toward his gun, but the possibility hung there like smoke. "We done here, Sheriff?" Marcus gathered his reins. "For now, but I'll be back if there's more complaints." "You know where to find me." The 3 men turned their horses and rode out, and Elena watched them until they disappeared over the first hill. Only then did she realize she was shaking. Rowan walked back to where she stood, his expression unreadable. "You all right?" "I brought trouble to your door," she said. "I'm sorry." Trouble was already here, has been for 8 years. He looked at her steadily. "Question is, can you live with it? Because if Voss is making noise to the sheriff, he's not done with you, and that means he's not done with me either." "I could leave, go somewhere else, somewhere he wouldn't find me." "You could, or you could stay and let me handle it." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why would you do that? Risk everything for someone you barely know?" Rowan was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Because you deserve better than running for the rest of your life. And because I'm tired of good people getting hurt while bad ones walk free. That's not a good enough reason to make an enemy of a man like Voss. It's the only reason that matters." He turned toward the barn, then paused. "You want to leave, Elena. I won't stop you. I'll give you money and a horse and supplies, and I'll wish you well. But if you stay, we do this together. No more apologizing. No more thinking you're a burden. You're not. You're someone who got dealt a bad hand and deserved better, and I can help with that, if you'll let me." She watched him walk away, her mind churning. Every instinct told her to run, to disappear before the situation got worse. She'd already lost one man to this country's casual cruelty. Watching another one die for her sake would be unbearable. But something else pushed back against that fear, something that had been growing since the day Rowan lifted her from the dirt in Stillwater. The possibility that she didn't have to run anymore, that she could stand and fight with someone who actually gave a damn whether she lived or died. That night over dinner, she broke the silence between them. "I want to stay," she said, "but I need to know what I'm staying for. What happens if Voss comes here? What happens if he brings men?" Rowan set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Then we deal with it. That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got." He leaned back in his chair. "I can't promise you safety, Elena. Can't promise this ends well. What I can promise is that I won't let anyone hurt you without going through me first. And I can promise that whatever comes, you won't face it alone. You're talking about killing. If it comes to that, yes. That doesn't frighten you?" His laugh was bitter. "Killing stopped frightening me in Kansas. What frightens me now is standing by and doing nothing while someone gets hurt. That's the devil I can't live with anymore." Elena absorbed this, the weight of it settling over her. "I don't want you to die for me. And I don't want you to die at all, so we'll just have to make sure neither of those things happen." She almost smiled. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Staying alive is the complicated part." The conversation ended there, but something had shifted between them. An understanding, unspoken but solid. They were in this together now, whatever this turned out to be. Over the following days, Elena threw herself into work with renewed purpose. She wasn't content just to keep house anymore. She wanted to understand the ranch, to learn how it functioned, to be useful in ways that went beyond cooking and cleaning. Rowan taught her to ride properly, patiently correcting her seat and her hands until she could handle a horse without fear. He showed her the boundaries of the property, the water sources, the places where the cattle liked to gather. He taught her to read weather and the color of the sky and the behavior of the animals, to know when a storm was coming before the first clouds appeared. "Why are you teaching me all this?" she asked one afternoon as they rode the fence line, checking for breaks. "Because you should know," he said simply. "This is your home now, same as mine. You should know how to take care of it." "You really mean that, don't you? That it's my home?" "I don't say things I don't mean." She was quiet for a moment, watching the way he sat his horse, easy and natural, like he'd been born to it. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What was her name? Your wife?" Rowan's hands tightened on the reins, but he didn't look away. "Sarah. And our daughter was Emma. She was 6 when they died." "Tell me about them." He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly he began to speak. "Sarah was strong. Stronger than me in most ways that mattered. She could outwork any man on the farm, but she never lost her gentleness, never let the hard country make her hard." His voice softened. "Emma looked just like her, same dark hair, same eyes. She used to follow me everywhere, asking questions about everything. Why do chickens have feathers? Where does the wind come from? Why is the sky blue? He paused. I didn't always have good answers, but I tried. What happened to the man who killed them? I told you, I found him, put a bullet through his heart. Do you regret it? No. The answer came without hesitation. I regret that I wasn't there to protect them. I regret that justice meant nothing to anyone but me, but I don't regret making him pay for what he did. Elena thought about Clayton Voss, about the beating, about the town that had watched and done nothing. Sometimes I think about going back there, to Stillwater, walking into that saloon and putting a bullet through him myself. Would it make you feel better? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it would just make you like him, turn you into someone who solves problems with violence. Like you did? Yes, he said quietly. Like I did. And I'm telling you, Elena, it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't make the pain go away. All it does is add more ghosts to the ones you already carry. Then what do we do? Just let him win? We survive. We build something better. We prove that people like him don't get to define who we are or what we become. He looked at her then, and his eyes were fierce. That's the only revenge that matters, living well despite what they did, becoming someone they couldn't break. They rode in silence after that, but Elena turned his words over in her mind, examining them from every angle. Part of her wanted to reject them, to hold on to her anger like a weapon. But another part, the part that was beginning to heal, recognized the truth in what he said. Surviving wasn't enough. She had to live. A week later, reality came calling again. Elena was in the garden behind the house, a small plot she'd started clearing, planning to plant vegetables before winter came, when she heard a horse approaching fast. She straightened, her hand going instinctively to the small knife she now carried at her belt, and saw a rider coming hard up the road. Not the sheriff this time. A younger man, lean and weathered, wearing the clothes of a working cowboy. He pulled up in front of the house just as Rowan came out, a rifle already in his hands. Caleb Rowan? The man called, breathing hard. That's me. Name's Tom Fletcher. I worked for the Circle D ranch south of Stillwater. He dismounted, clearly exhausted. I rode all night to find you. What's happened? Fletcher glanced at Elena, then back to Rowan. Clayton Voss bought up the Circle D 3 days ago, paid twice what it was worth, then started firing anyone who wouldn't swear loyalty to him personally. I was one of the ones who refused. He took a shaky breath. Before I left, I overheard him talking with some men he brought in from New Mexico. Hard men, Rowan. The kind you hire when you want something done and don't care how dirty it gets. What did you hear? He's planning to come for you, and for her. Fletcher nodded toward Elena. Says he's going to make an example. Show the whole territory what happens to people who defy him. Rowan's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his knuckles whiten on the rifle. When? Soon, maybe a few days. He's gathering men first, making sure he has enough to get the job done. Fletcher met Rowan's eyes. I don't know you, sir, but I know what Voss is, and I couldn't stand by knowing what he's planning without warning you. You took a risk coming here. Some things are worth the risk. Fletcher looked at Elena again, and she saw something like shame in his eyes. I was in Stillwater that day. I saw what he did to you, ma'am, and I didn't stop it, didn't even try. I've had to live with that these past weeks, and I don't like the man I saw in the mirror. He turned back to Rowan. So I'm here now. If you'll have me, I'd like to help however I can. Rowan studied him for a long moment. You know what you're asking. If you stand with us, Voss will come for you too. I'm already on his list just for quitting. Might as well be there for a good reason. Can you shoot? Well enough. Can you take orders? Better than I can give them. Rowan nodded slowly. All right then. Put your horse in the barn and come inside. We need to talk about what's coming. As Fletcher led his exhausted horse away, Elena moved close to Rowan. How many men do you think Voss will bring? Hard to say. If he's smart, enough to be sure of the outcome. 10, maybe. Maybe more. And we're 3. 3's better than 2, and we've got the defensive position. He looked at the ranch spread around them, and Elena could see him already calculating angles and approaches. This place was built to defend. Stone walls, good sight lines. If we're smart about it, numbers won't matter as much as you'd think. You sound like you've done this before. I have. More times than I care to count. He met her eyes. I'm not going to lie to you, Elena. This is going to be bad. People are going to get hurt. Maybe killed. If you want to leave, now's the time. Fletcher can take you north, get you somewhere safe. No, she interrupted. I'm staying. Elena, I'm staying, she repeated, her voice stronger. This is my home. You said so yourself. And I'm done running from men like Clayton Voss. If he wants me, he can come and take me, but I'm not making it easy. Rowan looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe, or recognition. Then we'd better get ready. The next 3 days passed in focused preparation. Rowan had Fletcher ride the property line, checking for places where riders could approach unseen. Elena helped stockpile supplies, food, water, ammunition, in the house and barn. They moved anything flammable away from the buildings and filled barrels with water in case of fire. Rowan taught Elena to shoot properly, spending hours with her behind the house until she could hit a target at 50 yards more often than not. Her hands shook the first time she fired the rifle, the kick bruising her still tender shoulder. But she gritted her teeth and kept at it until the weapon felt less like a foreign object and more like a tool she could actually use. You're a natural, Fletcher said one afternoon, watching her put 3 shots in a tight group on the target. Most people flinch right before they pull the trigger. You don't. I learned not to flinch a long time ago, she said quietly. In the evenings, the 3 of them sat at the kitchen table and talked strategy. Rowan sketched maps on paper, showing approaches and firing positions. They discussed scenarios, planned responses, tried to anticipate every possibility. The house is stone, so fire won't work easily, Rowan said. They'll try to pin us down, cut us off from water and supplies. If we let them surround us, we're done. So we don't let them, Fletcher said. We hit them before they're set, disrupt their approach. That means going out to meet them. Risky. Everything about this is risky. Elena looked at both men. But sitting here waiting to be attacked seems worse than taking the fight to them. Rowan nodded slowly. Agreed. But we'll need to know when they're coming, where they're coming from. I can ride out tomorrow, Fletcher offered. Scout the approaches, see if I can spot them before they get close. Do it, and be careful. Voss isn't stupid. He might have scouts of his own. The next morning, Fletcher rode out before dawn. Elena watched him go, then turned to find Rowan standing beside her. Are you afraid? She asked. Yes, he said simply. Fear's what keeps you alive, long as you don't let it control you. I keep thinking about your daughter, about Emma, how scared she must have been. Rowan's jaw tightened. Every day. But I can't change what happened to her. All I can do is make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. Is that what I am to you? A second chance. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held more emotion than she'd seen in them before. You're not a second chance, Elena. You're your own person with your own life and your own choices. But helping you, protecting you, maybe that's my second chance, a chance to be the man I should have been 8 years ago. She reached out and took his hand, surprising them both. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. You're a good man, Caleb Rowan. Whatever happens, I want you to know that. He squeezed her hand gently, then let go. Let's make sure we both live long enough for it to matter. Fletcher returned near sunset, riding hard. Rowan and Elena met him in the yard, and the news was written on his face before he spoke. They're coming, he said, dismounting. I saw them maybe 10 miles south, 12 men, well armed. They're moving slow, but they'll be here by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. 12, Rowan said quietly. Voss isn't taking chances. There's more. I recognize some of them. They're not ranch hands or cowboys. They're gunmen, professional killers. Elena felt ice in her stomach. He's not planning to arrest me. He's planning to execute us all. That's what it looks like. Fletcher's face was grim. I'm sorry I brought this to your door. You didn't bring it, Rowan said. Voss did, and now we deal with it. He looked at both of them. Listen to me, both of you. What's coming tomorrow is going to test everything we are. You're going to be scared. You're going to want to run. But if we stand together, if we're smart and careful and brave, we have a chance. Not a good chance, maybe, but a chance. What's the plan? Elena asked. Rowan's smile was hard. We make them regret coming here. They spent that evening in careful preparation, speaking little, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena cleaned weapons and checked ammunition. Fletcher inspected the horses and prepared supplies for a possible retreat. Rowan walked the property one last time, committing every detail to memory. As full dark fell, they gathered in the house and barred the doors. No one suggested sleep. They sat at the table, a lamp burning low between them, and waited for dawn. At some point in the small hours, Elena spoke into the silence. If I don't get a chance to say it later, thank you, both of you, for seeing me as worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for, Fletcher said. I should have proven that weeks ago in Stillwater. I'm glad I get the chance now. Rowan said nothing, but he reached across the table and covered her hand with his own. And in that simple gesture, Elena felt more seen, more valued, more human than she had in all the months since Daniel died. Whatever tomorrow brought, she wouldn't face it alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Find resources. Dawn came cold and clear, the sky bleeding from black to gray to pale gold. Elena stood at the window watching the light spread across the hills, her rifle resting against her shoulder. Behind her, Rowan and Fletcher moved through the house with quiet efficiency, checking weapons, positioning supplies, preparing for what was coming. She hadn't slept. None of them had. But exhaustion felt distant now, held at bay by the sharp clarity that came with knowing everything was about to change. Coffee's ready, Fletcher said, appearing at her elbow with a tin cup. The smell of it was strong and bitter, real cowboy coffee boiled hard enough to strip paint. Thank you. She took it, grateful for the warmth against her palms. How long do you think we have? Hour, maybe 2, depends on when they broke camp. He looked out the window beside her. Beautiful morning for what's coming. Is it always like this? This waiting? Worst part of any fight. Once it starts, instinct takes over. But the waiting, that's when your mind tries to kill you with all the things that could go wrong. Elena took a sip of coffee, letting the heat of it ground her. I'm not afraid of dying. Not anymore. I should have died in Stillwater. Everything since then has been borrowed time. That's a dangerous way to think. Maybe. But it's also freeing. Voss took everything from me except my life. And I've decided he doesn't get that either, not without a fight. Fletcher studied her with something like admiration. Rowan was right about you. You've got iron in you. I've got nothing left to lose. That's different than iron. Sometimes they look the same from the outside. Rowan joined them at the window, his own coffee in hand. In the growing light, Elena could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes, but also something harder. Battle readiness, maybe. The focus of a man who'd been here before and knew what it cost. I want you both to understand something, he said quietly. When they come, there's going to be a moment where you think we can't win, where the odds look impossible and running seems like the only choice. That's when men like Voss win, not because they're stronger, but because good people give up. He looked at each of them in turn. I need you to promise me you won't give up, no matter how bad it gets. I promise, Elena said immediately. Same, Fletcher added. We're in this to the end. Good. Rowan set down his cup. Then let's make sure that end isn't today. They took their positions as the sun climbed higher. Rowan placed Fletcher in the barn loft with a rifle, giving him a clear view of the main approach. Elena he stationed in the house at the front window, where the stone walls would provide the most protection. He himself took position on the porch, partially concealed behind a water trough he'd reinforced with extra planking. Remember what I taught you, he told Elena before taking his place. Breathe steady, aim center mass. Don't waste ammunition on shots you're not sure of. And if things go wrong, if they breach the house, you run out the back and you ride for town. You get to the federal marshal in Austin and you tell him what happened here. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. That's the deal, Elena. You follow my orders or this doesn't work. She wanted to argue, but she saw the steel in his eyes and knew he meant it. All right, but it won't come to that. No, he agreed. It won't. He squeezed her shoulder once, a brief touch of reassurance, then moved to his position, and they waited. The riders appeared just after 9, a dark line against the brown hills to the south. Elena counted them as they came closer. 12, just as Fletcher had said. They rode in a loose formation, confident and unhurried, men who knew they had the numbers and didn't expect serious resistance. Clayton Voss rode at the front, recognizable even at a distance by his expensive horse and the way he sat his saddle like a king surveying his domain. Seeing him again sent a jolt of pure rage through Elena's chest, so strong it made her hand shake on the rifle. "Steady," Rowan called softly from the porch. "Don't let him see he gets to you." Elena forced herself to breathe, to find the calm center Rowan had taught her during their practice sessions. The anger was still there, burning hot beneath her ribs, but she controlled it now instead of letting it control her. The riders stopped about 100 yards out, just beyond easy rifle range. Voss dismounted, handed his reins to one of his men, and walked forward alone. He stopped at what he probably thought was a safe distance and called out, "Caleb Rowan, I know you can hear me." Rowan stood slowly, keeping the water trough between himself and Voss. "I hear you." "Then you know why I'm here. Send out the woman and we'll settle this peacefully. No one needs to die today." "You're right about that. Turn around and ride back to Stillwater, and we can all go on living." Voss laughed, the sound carrying clear across the distance. "You always did have a sense of humor, but you're not in a position to make demands. I've got 12 men. You've got, what, you and maybe 1 or 2 others? Those aren't winning odds." "Depends on how you define winning. I'm planning to still be standing when this is over. Can you say the same?" "I can say I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits." Voss's voice hardened. "The woman is a criminal. She assaulted me, stole from me, and fled justice. I have every right to take her back to stand trial." "You have every right to go to hell," Rowan shot back. "Elena Moore stays here, under my protection, and anyone who tries to take her answers to me." Big words from a has-been killer hiding behind stone walls. Not hiding, waiting. There's a difference. Voss was quiet for a moment, and Elena could almost see him recalculating. "You really want to die for a woman you barely know? A woman who's nothing to you?" "She's more than nothing. She's someone who deserves better than what you did to her. And I'm someone who's done standing aside while men like you hurt people because you can." Noble. Stupid, but noble. Voss turned and walked back toward his men, calling over his shoulder. "Last chance, Rowan. Send her out, or we come in and take her." "Come ahead." Rowan's voice rang out hard and clear. "But you better bring more men." Voss mounted his horse, and Elena saw him gesture to his men. They spread out, forming a wide arc around the ranch buildings. Professional tactics. These weren't cowboys or ranch hands. Fletcher had been right. These were hired guns who knew their business. "Here we go," Rowan said quietly. "Remember, controlled fire. Make every shot count." The first shot came from one of Voss's men, a ranging shot that kicked up dirt 20 feet short of the house. Testing. Seeing where the defenders were positioned, Fletcher answered from the barn loft, and one of the riders jerked backward in his saddle. Not a killing shot, but enough to make the man wheel his horse away, clutching his shoulder. "First blood to us," Fletcher called. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Voss's men opened up with a ragged volley, bullets thudding into the stone walls of the house and the wooden beams of the barn. The sound was deafening, a continuous crack and whine of lead-seeking flesh. Elena ducked below the window, her heart hammering. She'd been in the war, had heard gunfire before, but never directed at her, never with the specific intent to kill. The reality of it was different than any preparation could be, more viscous, more personal, more terrifyingly real. "Elena!" Rowan's voice cut through the noise. "Pick your targets. Don't waste ammunition!" She forced herself to rise, to sight down the rifle barrel at the men spread across the yard. One rider was moving closer, using his horse as cover while he advanced on the house. Elena led him slightly, just as Rowan had taught her, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The rider's horse reared, and the man tumbled from the saddle. He scrambled for cover behind a water barrel, and Elena couldn't tell if she'd hit him or just spooked his mount. No time to wonder. Another rider was circling toward the barn. She tracked him, fired, missed, adjusted, fired again. This time the bullet caught him in the leg and he went down hard, his horse bolting. "Good shooting," Rowan called. He fired twice in quick succession, and one of Voss's men dropped without a sound. The attack intensified. Voss's men had figured out the defensive positions now and were concentrating their fire, trying to pin down the defenders while others moved closer. Elena saw two men sprinting toward the barn, using the angle of the building to avoid Fletcher's field of fire. "Fletcher!" she screamed. "Two on your left!" His rifle barked twice and both men stumbled. One went down completely. The other made it to the barn wall, out of Fletcher's line of sight. "I've got one at the base," Fletcher yelled. "Can't get an angle." Rowan swore and shifted position, trying to draw a bead on the man. But moving exposed him, and bullets immediately chewed into the water trough, sending splinters flying. The man at the barn wall produced something from his coat, a bottle with a rag stuffed in the neck. Elena's blood went cold. Fire. They were going to burn them out. She didn't think, just acted. She stood, sighted, and fired in one smooth motion. The bottle exploded in the man's hand, kerosene splashing across him. He screamed and dropped, rolling in the dirt to extinguish flames that weren't yet burning. "Nice shot!" Rowan's approval was fierce, but they were being pushed back. Voss's remaining men, 8 now, maybe 9, had found cover and were maintaining steady fire. And they had patience. They didn't need to charge. They could just wait, pin down the defenders, and pick them off one by one. "We can't stay defensive," Fletcher called from the barn. "They'll just wear us down." Rowan knew it too. Elena could see the calculation in his eyes, the terrible arithmetic of siege warfare. "All right," he said finally. "We go to Plan B." "What's Plan B?" Elena asked. "We make them think they're winning." He explained quickly. They would cease fire, make it seem like they were conserved ammunition or pinned down. Wait for Voss's men to get confident and move closer, then hit them hard when they were exposed. "It's risky," Fletcher said. "If they rush us, then we're dead anyway. At least this way we control the engagement." Rowan looked at both of them. "On my signal, we stop shooting, no matter what. Let them think they've got us." The silence when they stopped firing was eerie. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Elena heard Voss's voice calling orders, heard men moving, boots crunching on gravel and dirt. She pressed herself against the wall beside the window, rifle ready, and prayed this would work. Voss's men advanced cautiously at first, then with growing confidence when no shots came from the house or barn. Elena could see them through the window, 4 men moving toward the house, 3 toward the barn, spread out but exposed. "Now!" Rowan shouted. All 3 defenders opened fire at once. At close range against exposed targets, the effect was devastating. 2 of the men advancing on the house went down immediately. A third took a bullet in the chest and staggered back, dropping his rifle. The 4th dove for cover, but Rowan's second shot caught him before he made it. Fletcher was equally effective. 2 men dropped near the barn, and the third retreated, firing wildly. But the victory was short-lived. The man Elena had shot earlier, the one behind the water barrel, had used the distraction to circle around. He burst through the back door of the house while Elena was focused on the window, his pistol already drawn. Time seemed to slow. Elena saw him, saw the gun coming up, knew she couldn't bring the rifle around fast enough. Her mind registered these facts with crystal clarity, along with the absolute certainty that she was about to die. Then Rowan was there, moving faster than a man his size should be able to move. He hit the gunman from the side, driving him into the wall. The pistol discharged, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet plowing into the ceiling. They went down together, a tangle of limbs and violence. The gunman was younger, faster, but Rowan fought with the desperate savagery of a man defending something he couldn't afford to lose. He got his hands on the man's throat and squeezed, his face a mask of controlled fury. The gunman clawed at Rowan's eyes, his face going purple. His legs kicked, his body thrashed. And then, suddenly, he went still. Rowan held on for another 5 seconds, making sure, then released him and stood. His hands were shaking. "You all right?" Elena asked, her voice not quite steady. "Yeah." He picked up the dead man's pistol and handed it to her. "Keep this, just in case." Outside, the shooting had stopped. Elena moved cautiously to the window and saw the remaining men, only 3 now, retreating toward their horses. Voss was screaming at them, trying to rally them, but the fight had gone out of them. They'd come expecting easy prey and found wolves instead. "They're running," Fletcher called from the barn. "Let them go," Rowan ordered. "We've made our point." But Voss wasn't running. He sat his horse at the edge of the property, staring at the house with an expression of pure hatred. Even at this distance, Elena could feel the malevolence radiating from him. "This isn't over, Rowan," he shouted. "You hear me? This isn't over." "It is for today," Rowan called back. "And if you're smart, it's over for good. Next time I won't let you leave." Voss wheeled his horse and galloped after his men, and within minutes they were gone, leaving 6 bodies in the yard and silence in their wake. Elena's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the floor, the pistol slipping from her nerveless fingers. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the fight was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. Rowan came and knelt beside her. "Hey, look at me." She raised her eyes to his face. "You did good," he said quietly. "Real good. You kept your head, made your shots count, probably saved Fletcher's life with that warning. You should be proud." "I killed people," she whispered. "You defended your home, defended yourself. That's not murder, Elena. That's survival." "Will it always feel like this?" "Like what? Like I want to throw up and scream and cry all at the same time?" His expression softened. "Yeah, probably. And that's how you know you're still human. The day it stops bothering you is the day you need to worry." Fletcher came in through the front door, his rifle over his shoulder. His shirt was torn and there was blood on his sleeve, but he was grinning. "We did it. We actually did it." "We survived the first round," Rowan corrected, but Voss meant what he said. "This isn't over." "So what do we do?" Rowan stood, his jaw set. "We take the fight to him. We end this before he can come back with more men and more firepower." Elena looked up at him. "You mean go to Stillwater?" "I mean finish what we started. Voss thinks he's untouchable because he's rich and connected. Time to show him that money doesn't stop bullets." "That's a suicide mission," Fletcher said. "He'll have the whole town on his side. He'll have the people too afraid to stand against him. But fear only works until someone calls the bluff." Rowan looked at both of them. "I'm going. Tonight. With or without you. But I'd rather it be with." Elena stood, ignoring her shaking legs. "I'm going. Elena, I'm going," she repeated. "This is my fight as much as yours. More, maybe. And I'm done letting other people fight my battles." Fletcher sighed. "Well, I've come this far. Might as well see it through to the end." He managed a wry smile. "Besides, somebody's got to keep you two from getting killed." "Then we'd better prepare," Rowan said. "We ride at sunset. And when we get to Stillwater, we're going to give Clayton Voss a choice. Leave the territory for good, or face justice. Real justice." They spent the afternoon in grim preparation. Bodies had to be moved, weapons had to be cleaned and reloaded, horses had to be readied. The work was hard and necessary, and it kept Elena's mind from dwelling too much on what they were about to do. As the sun began its descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, the 3 of them stood in the yard and looked at each other. "Last chance to back out," Rowan said. "Not a chance," Elena replied. Fletcher just shook his head and checked his pistol. "All right then." Rowan swung into his saddle and Elena and Fletcher did the same. "Let's go finish this." They rode out as the light failed, 3 figures against the gathering dark, heading toward a town that had turned its back on justice and a man who thought himself above consequence. Behind them, the ranch stood silent and strong, a testament to what could be built when people refused to surrender to cruelty. Ahead, Stillwater waited. And before the night was through, one way or another, accounts would be settled. The ride to Stillwater took them 3 hours through rough country, following old cattle trails that skirted the main road. Rowan set a hard pace, pushing them towards something that felt inevitable now, like a storm that had been building since the day he'd pulled Elena from the dirt. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. Each of them knew what they were riding into, knew the odds weren't good. But sometimes the right thing to do wasn't the safe thing, and they'd all made their peace with that. The moon was high when they finally saw the lights of Stillwater spread across the valley below them. From this distance, it looked almost peaceful, just another frontier town trying to scratch out existence from hard ground. But Elena knew better now. Knew that beneath the lamplit windows and the sounds of pianos from the saloons, there was rot. The kind that came from good people choosing comfort over courage, silence over truth. "Voss will be at his saloon," Rowan said, studying the town. "The Lucky Diamond, right?" "That's right," Elena confirmed. 2 stories, sits on the corner of Main and 3rd. He's got rooms upstairs where he conducts his business. Probably where his men are too, the ones who made it back. Fletcher shifted in his saddle. "So, how do we do this? Ride in shooting?" "We ride in talking," Rowan said. "We give him a chance to surrender, to leave peacefully. If he takes it, fine. If not," he let the sentence hang. "You really think he'll surrender?" Elena asked. "No, but I want the people of Stillwater to see we tried. Want them to know we gave him every chance." Rowan's eyes were hard in the moonlight. "When this is over, I want there to be no question about who was in the right." They rode down into the valley, approaching the town from the west. It was late enough that the streets were mostly empty, just a few horses tied up outside the saloons and the sound of raucous laughter from behind closed doors. They tied their horses 2 buildings down from the Lucky Diamond and approached on foot. Through the windows, Elena could see men drinking, playing cards, the usual business of a frontier saloon. And there, at a corner table, sat Clayton Voss surrounded by his remaining men. He saw them the moment they pushed through the doors. The room went quiet as a grave. Voss's face went from shock to rage to something colder in the space of 3 heartbeats. He stood slowly, his hand hovering near his pistol, his eyes locked on Rowan. The 3 men with him, survivors from the ranch attack, pushed back their chairs and spread out, creating angles. Professional moves from professional killers. "You've got some nerve walking in here," Voss said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "After what you did today." "After what I did?" Rowan's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You brought 12 men to kill 3 people and got sent running with your tail between your legs. That's not on me. That's on you for thinking money made you bulletproof. You murdered 6 of my men. I defended my home. There's a difference." Rowan took 2 steps further into the room, and Elena noticed how the other patrons were edging toward the walls, getting clear of the line of fire. "But I'm not here to argue the past. I'm here to talk about the future." "I'm listening." Voss's hand stayed near his gun. "You've got 2 choices. First choice is you pack up tonight, leave this territory, and never come back. You go somewhere else, start over, and we never see each other again. And the second choice? I kill you right here and let the law sort out who was in the right." The room seemed to hold its breath. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, feel the weight of the pistol at her hip. Beside her, Fletcher had positioned himself to cover Voss's men, and she could see the concentration in his eyes, the readiness. Voss smiled, and it was the coldest thing Elena had ever seen. "You think you can just walk into my town, threaten me in my own establishment, and walk out alive? You've lost your mind, Rowan." "Your town?" Rowan gestured around the room. "These people aren't yours. This town isn't yours. You've just convinced everyone you're too dangerous to stand against. But that ends tonight." Big words from a man outnumbered. "Am I?" Rowan raised his voice, addressing the whole room. "How many of you actually want Clayton Voss here? How many of you sleep better knowing he's in charge? How many of you think he makes this town better instead of worse?" Silence answered him, but Elena saw something in the faces of the men pressed against the walls. Shame, maybe. Or recognition. The acknowledgement of a truth they'd been avoiding. "That's what I thought," Rowan continued. "You're all afraid, and I understand that. Fear's a powerful thing, but it's also a choice. You can choose to let this man run your lives, or you can choose to stand up. Right here. Right now." "They won't help you," Voss said confidently. "They know what happens to people who stand against me." "Like Daniel Moore?" Elena's voice cut through the room like a blade, surprising even herself. She stepped forward, her hand resting on her pistol. "Like my husband, who confronted you about a debt and ended up beaten so badly he died from his injuries? Is that what happens?" Voss's eyes narrowed. Your husband was weak. He picked a fight he couldn't win. He asked for money you owed him. That's not picking a fight. That's asking for what's right. Elena's voice grew stronger, fed by months of suppressed rage and grief. And you killed him for it, just like you tried to kill me, just like you'll kill anyone who doesn't bow down and kiss your boots. Careful, woman. You're in no position to make accusations. I'm in the perfect position. I'm someone you already tried to destroy who's still standing. What are you going to do, beat me again? You already did your worst, and I survived. She looked around the room, meeting eyes that had watched her beaten in the street. All of you know what he is. All of you know what he's done. And all of you looked away because it was easier than doing what's right. An older man near the bar shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, with respect, you don't understand how things work here. I understand perfectly. I understand that evil wins when good people decide it's not their problem. She turned back to Voss. But it is your problem. Because he won't stop with me, or with my husband, or with Rowan. He'll keep taking and taking until there's nothing left of this town but fear and ashes. Enough! Voss snapped. His composure was cracking, rage bleeding through the cracks. You want to die so badly, I'll oblige you right here. His hand dropped toward his gun. Rowan was faster. His pistol cleared leather in a blur of motion and leveled at Voss's chest. Don't! Voss froze, his hand an inch from his gun. His men had drawn too, but Fletcher already had them covered with his rifle. The standoff hung in the air, tense and brittle. One wrong move from turning the saloon into an abattoir. You won't shoot, Voss said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Not in cold blood, not with all these witnesses. You're right, Rowan said. I won't shoot you in cold blood. But you draw that gun, and I'll put you down like the rabid dog you are. That's not murder. That's justice. There's no justice out here. Only power. Then let me show you what power looks like when it's backed by something more than money. The saloon doors swung open behind them, and Sheriff Marcus walked in with 2 deputies. Elena's heart sank. If the law was on Voss's side, this was over. But Marcus didn't draw his weapon. He just stood there, looking tired and old, and when he spoke, his voice carried regret. That's enough. All of you. Lower your weapons. Sheriff, Voss said, relief flooding his face. Thank God you're here. These people broke into my establishment, threatened my life. I know what they did, Clayton. I also know what you did. Marcus met Voss's eyes steadily. I know you hired those men to attack Rowan's ranch. I know you've been running this town through fear and violence for too long. And I know I should have stopped you years ago. You can't be serious. You work for me. I work for the people of this town, or I'm supposed to. The sheriff's hand moved to his own gun. And I'm done looking the other way while you turn this place into your personal kingdom. Voss's face went purple with rage. You senile old fool, you think you can turn on me? I own you. I own this whole damn town. Nobody owns people, Clayton. That's something you never understood. Marcus looked at Rowan. I can't let you kill him, but I can arrest him, take him to Austin, let a real court decide what happens. That good enough? Rowan considered this, his gun still trained on Voss. Elena could see him weighing it, the need for revenge against the promise of actual justice. Finally, slowly, he lowered his weapon. That's good enough. Long as he stands trial for everything he's done. He will! You have my word! Marcus gestured to his deputies. Take him. You're making a mistake, Voss snarled as the deputies moved toward him. All of you. I have lawyers, connections, money. I'll be out in a week, and when I am, every single person in this room is going to pay. Maybe, Marcus said, but at least we'll know we tried to do the right thing. That's more than we could say before. Voss's men had lowered their guns, seeing which way the wind was blowing. They didn't owe Voss loyalty, just money. And money didn't spend well when you were dead. As the deputies approached, Voss made his move. He was fast for a man his size, faster than anyone expected. His gun cleared leather and swung toward Elena, murder in his eyes. If he was going down, he was taking her with him. Rowan fired. The shot was clean, precise, the bullet taking Voss through the right shoulder and spinning him around. His gun clattered to the floor, and he went down hard, clutching his bleeding shoulder and screaming curses. He drew on her, Rowan said calmly, holstering his pistol. Everyone saw it. We did, Marcus confirmed. Self-defense, clear as day. He looked down at Voss writhing on the floor. Get him to the doctor, then into a cell, and this time we do things by the book. As the deputies hauled Voss to his feet and dragged him toward the door, he locked eyes with Elena one last time. She met his gaze without flinching, and she saw something shift in his expression. The recognition that he'd lost, that she'd beaten him not by being stronger or richer or more connected, but by refusing to be destroyed. When he was gone, the tension in the room broke like a fever. Men started breathing again, talking in low voices, processing what they'd just witnessed. Marcus approached their group, and Elena could see the weight of shame on his shoulders. I owe all of you an apology. Especially you, Mrs. Moore. I should have stood up for you weeks ago. Should have stood up for a lot of people over the years. I let fear make me a coward, and people got hurt because of it. Why now? Elena asked. What changed? Tom Fletcher rode through town this morning, told me what Voss was planning. Told me if I didn't do something, there'd be blood on my hands I could never wash off. He glanced at Fletcher. He was right. I've got enough regrets already. Didn't need more. Fletcher nodded acknowledgement, saying nothing. What happens now? Rowan asked. Now we rebuild. Try to make this town into something better than what it's been. Marcus looked around at the watching faces. And that starts with everyone here. You all stood by while Voss ran roughshod over decent people. You all looked away when you should have looked closer. That can't happen anymore. We've got to be better. All of us. An older woman Elena recognized from the general store spoke up, her voice trembling. We were afraid. He had power, money, men with guns. I know, Marcus said gently, and I'm not saying it was easy to stand against him, but that doesn't make it right that we didn't. We let fear turn us into bystanders to cruelty, and we can't let that happen again. The room was quiet, people absorbing this truth and their part in it. Rowan touched Elena's elbow. We should go. Let them sort this out. But before they could leave, a young woman pushed through the crowd, Mary Alice Chen, who ran the boarding house where Elena had stayed. Mrs. Moore, wait. I need to say something. Elena turned, and Mary Alice's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry, the young woman said. I'm so sorry. When you needed help, when you needed a place to stay, I turned you away because I was afraid of what Voss might do if he found out. I chose my own safety over doing what was right, and I've hated myself for it every day since. You weren't the only one, Elena said quietly. This whole town made that choice. But that doesn't make it right. And I want you to know, if you ever need anything, if you ever need help or a place to stay, or just someone to talk to, my door is open. That's a promise. Others spoke up then, offering similar apologies and assurances. The butcher who'd refused her credit, the seamstress who'd turned away her business, the minister who'd suggested she leave town for everyone's peace of mind. They all carried shame, and they all wanted absolution. Elena listened to them, and she felt something unexpected rising in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. It was too soon for that, the wounds too fresh. But maybe the beginning of understanding. They were human, flawed and frightened, and they'd made the wrong choices. But they were trying to acknowledge that now, trying to do better. Thank you, she said finally. All of you. I appreciate the apologies, and I hope you mean what you're saying about change, because words are easy. It's the doing that's hard. We'll do better, the minister said. Starting now, starting with making sure justice actually happens this time. Marcus nodded. I'll personally escort Voss to Austin tomorrow. Make sure he stands trial for everything. Your husband's death, the assault on you, the attack on Rowan's ranch, all of it. See that you do, Rowan said. His voice was hard but not unkind. Because if he walks, if he comes back here, then all this talk about change and justice won't mean a damn thing. He won't walk. Not this time. Marcus extended his hand. You have my word. Rowan shook it, a gesture of tentative trust, then turned to Elena and Fletcher. Come on, let's go home. They walked out into the night, and Elena felt the cool air on her face like a blessing. Behind them, the saloon had erupted in conversation, people talking over each other, trying to make sense of what had happened and what it meant. But Elena wasn't thinking about them anymore. She was thinking about the ranch waiting in the hills, about the life she was building there, about the man who'd stepped into the street when everyone else had looked away. They rode most of the way in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Fletcher who finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "Did we actually do it? Did we actually win?" "We survived," Rowan corrected. "Whether we won depends on what happens next, on whether that town actually changes, whether Voss actually faces justice." "But you gave them the chance," Elena said. "You could have killed him, could have made it simple and final, but you gave them the chance to do the right thing." "Yeah, well, we'll see if they take it." Rowan's voice was gruff, but Elena heard something softer underneath. Hope. Maybe. Or at least the possibility of it. When they finally reached the ranch, the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, that deep blue that came before dawn. They unsaddled the horses in weary silence, and Fletcher headed for the barn. "I'll take the loft again tonight," he said. "If that's all right, don't quite trust that this is over yet." "Good idea," Rowan agreed. "We'll spell each other. 4-hour watches until we know Voss is actually in custody." After Fletcher left, Elena and Rowan stood in the yard, watching the stars fade. She was exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and willpower, but she didn't want to go inside yet, didn't want this moment to end. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For saving my life, for giving me a home, for making me feel like I was worth fighting for." "You were always worth fighting for," Rowan said. "You just needed someone to see it." "Why did you see it? When everyone else looked away?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Because Sarah deserved someone to fight for her, and nobody did. And I can't let that keep happening. Can't keep being a world where good people get hurt and bad people win just because everyone's too afraid to stand up." Elena understood then. Understood that this had never really been about her, not entirely. It had been about a man trying to save the people he couldn't save before, trying to make right a wrong that could never truly be made right. But that didn't make it less real. Didn't make his protection less genuine or his caring less true. "I'm not her," Elena said gently. "I'm not Sarah." "I know that." "Do you?" "Because sometimes I think you see her when you look at me, see the woman you couldn't save." Rowan turned to face her fully, and his eyes were clear and present. "When I first saw you in that street, maybe I did see Sarah. But that's not who I see now. Now I see Elena Moore, a woman who survived hell and came out stronger. A woman who learned to shoot, learned to fight, learned to stand up for herself. You're not Sarah. You're not anyone but yourself. And that's exactly who I'm proud to know." The words hit her harder than she expected, bringing tears to her eyes. "I was so broken when you found me, so ready to just give up and die. But you didn't. You chose to live. And that choice, that strength, that's all you, Elena. I just gave you a place to heal. The healing itself, that was your doing." She wiped at her eyes, embarrassed by the tears. "What happens now? Assuming Voss goes to trial, assuming he's actually convicted. What do we do with our lives?" "We keep building, keep making this place into something good." He gestured around at the ranch. "I've been alone here for 8 years, just going through the motions. But these past weeks, with you and Fletcher here, it's starting to feel like more than just a place to hide from the past. It's starting to feel like a real home. Is that what you want? For us to stay?" "If that's what you want. I'm not trying to replace what you lost, Elena, your husband, your dreams of what your life would be. But if you want to build something new here, if you want to help me turn this ranch into something that matters, I'd be honored to have you." Elena looked around at the buildings, catching the first light of dawn, at the corrals and the barn and the house that had become her sanctuary. She thought about everything she'd lost and everything she'd found, about the woman she'd been, and the woman she was becoming. "I want to stay," she said finally, "not because I'm afraid to leave or because I don't have anywhere else to go, but because this feels like where I'm supposed to be, like I've finally found the place I can build a life that's actually mine." Rowan smiled and it transformed his face. "Then welcome home, Elena Moore, for however long you want it." They stood there as the sun crested the hills, painting the world in shades of gold and pink, and Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. She'd been beaten, broken, left for dead. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd fought back, stood up, refused to be destroyed. And now, standing in the morning light with a man who'd given her the chance to become strong again, she understood something fundamental about herself. She wasn't a victim anymore. Wasn't someone things happened to, someone who waited for others to decide her fate. She was a survivor, a fighter, someone who'd been knocked down and gotten back up, and that made all the difference. The next weeks passed in a strange kind of limbo, waiting for news from Austin, waiting to see if justice would actually be served, or if Voss would use his money and connections to slip free. Fletcher stayed on at the ranch, proving himself invaluable with the cattle and the daily work that never seemed to end. The three of them fell into an easy rhythm, each contributing what they could, building something together that felt solid and real. Word came from Sheriff Marcus after 10 days. Voss was being held in the federal jail in Austin, awaiting trial. The charges were serious: conspiracy to commit murder, assault, attempted murder, corruption. The evidence was strong, built not just on Elena's testimony, but on statements from a dozen people in Stillwater who'd finally found the courage to speak up. "He's not getting out," Marcus wrote in his letter. "Not this time." The prosecutor says it's one of the clearest cases he's seen. Voss made too many enemies, hurt too many people. His money can't save him now. Elena read the letter 3 times, hardly daring to believe it. After so long living in fear, after months of looking over her shoulder and waiting for the other shoe to drop, the idea of actual justice seemed almost impossible. "Do you think it's real?" she asked Rowan that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Do you think he'll actually pay for what he did? I think we've done everything we can. The rest is up to the law." He glanced at her. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to feel satisfied, vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired. Like I've been carrying a weight for so long that even putting it down doesn't feel real yet. Give it time. Healing doesn't happen all at once." She knew he was right, knew that the scars Voss had left, both physical and emotional, would take time to fade, but she also knew something else now, something important. She was going to be all right. Not today, maybe, not tomorrow, but eventually, in time, she would heal. And when she did, she would be stronger for having survived. That night, she dreamed of Daniel for the first time in weeks. But instead of the dying man in the rented room, she saw him as he'd been when they first met, young and hopeful, full of dreams about the future. He was smiling at her, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're going to be all right," he said. "You're going to build something good. I'm proud of you, Elena. So proud." She woke with tears on her face, but peace in her heart. Daniel was gone, and that would always hurt. But she was still here, still living, still building, still becoming, and that was enough. 6 weeks after the confrontation in Stillwater, a rider came up the road carrying an official envelope sealed with the territorial court's stamp. Elena was in the garden when she saw him, her hands dirty from planting winter vegetables, and her heart kicked hard against her ribs. This was it. Whatever justice looked like, it was in that envelope. Rowan emerged from the barn as the courier dismounted, and Fletcher came down from the north pasture where he'd been mending fence. The 3 of them stood together as Rowan broke the seal and read the letter, his face unreadable. "Well?" Elena finally asked when she couldn't stand the silence anymore. Rowan looked up, and there was something fierce and satisfied in his eyes. Guilty. On all counts. 20 years in the territorial prison, no possibility of early release. His assets have been seized to pay restitution to his victims. He handed her the letter. "It's over, Elena. He's done." She took the paper with shaking hands and read the words herself, needing to see them to believe them. 20 years. Clayton Voss would be an old man when he got out, broken and powerless. The thought should have filled her with vindication, with triumph. Instead, she just felt empty. Relieved, yes, but also hollowed out, like she'd been holding herself together for so long that she didn't quite know what to do now that she could finally let go. "You all right?" Rowan asked quietly. "I think so. I spent so long afraid of him, hating him, that I don't know who I am without that fear." She looked at the letter again. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You've been in survival mode since the day I found you. Now you actually get to live instead of just survive. That's going to take some getting used to. Fletcher cleared his throat. I should give you two some privacy. I'll go check those fence posts again. He left quickly, and Elena was grateful for his tact. She looked at Rowan, really looked at him, and saw the same relief in his eyes that she felt. This had been his fight too, his chance at redemption for the people he couldn't save before. Thank you, she said, for everything. For seeing me when no one else would. For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. For giving me a place to become strong again. You were always strong, Elena. You just needed time to remember it. They stood there in the afternoon sun, the letter between them like a bridge between who they'd been and who they were becoming. And Elena realized something that had been growing in her heart for weeks, but that she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. She didn't want to leave, didn't want to go back to Stillwater or move on to some other town or try to rebuild the life she'd planned with Daniel. She wanted to stay here, on this ranch, with this man who'd shown her what it meant to be truly seen and valued. But she didn't know if that was what he wanted, didn't know if his kindness was just duty or if it meant something more. What happens now? She asked. Now that Voss is gone and the threat is over? Rowan was quiet for a moment, and she could see him choosing his words carefully. That depends on what you want. You're free now, Elena. Free to go anywhere, do anything, build whatever life you want for yourself. And if what I want is to stay here? His eyes met hers, and she saw hope flicker there. Then I'd be grateful to have you. This place, it's been just a house for 8 years, but with you here, it started to feel like a home again. Just as a housekeeper? The question came out before she could stop it, bold and vulnerable at once. Rowan stepped closer, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. You know it's more than that. Has been for a while now. I tried to keep it professional, tried not to let myself feel things I had no right to feel. You'd been through hell, and the last thing you needed was some broken-down rancher making things complicated. What if I want complicated? Do you? Because I need you to be sure, Elena. I'm not an easy man. I've got ghosts that won't ever fully leave me alone, and I've done things I can't take back. If you stay, if this becomes something more, I need you to know what you're getting into. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers. I know exactly what I'm getting into. I'm getting a man who saved my life when he didn't have to, who taught me to be strong again, who made me feel like I was worth something when the whole world had told me I wasn't. That's what I'm getting into, Caleb. And I want it, if you do. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The fear of moving on, of betraying his first family's memory by finding happiness again. The guilt of surviving when they hadn't. The terror of opening himself up to loss one more time. Then something shifted. A decision made. A door opened. I do, he said quietly. I want it more than I've wanted anything in 8 years. But I'm scared, Elena. Scared of losing someone I care about again. Scared of not being enough. We're both scared. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared just means we're brave enough to try anyway. She squeezed his hand. I'm not asking you to forget Sarah and Emma. I would never ask that. I'm just asking for a chance to build something new alongside what you had before. Not instead of it. Alongside it. Rowan pulled her into his arms then, holding her close, and Elena felt something inside her finally, fully relax. This was home. Not the ranch, not the house, but this. Being held by someone who saw all of her, the broken parts and the strong parts, and valued both equally. We'll take it slow, he said into her hair. Figure things out as we go. No rush, no pressure. Just seeing where this leads. That sounds perfect. They stood there for a long time, holding each other while the sun tracked across the sky and the ranch settled around them. Eventually, Fletcher came back, took one look at them, and grinned. About damn time, he said. I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever. Rowan laughed, actually laughed, and the sound of it was like sunlight breaking through clouds. That obvious? To everyone but you two, apparently. Fletcher shook his head. So what's the plan now? Do I need to start building a second house for my old bachelor self? You're not going anywhere, Elena said firmly. This ranch needs 3 people to run it properly, and you're part of this now. Part of this family. The word hung in the air, family. It was a bold claim, maybe too bold. But looking at these 2 men, the ones who'd stood with her when the world fell apart, Elena knew it was true. They were her family now, cobbled together from loss and survival and the determination to build something better. Family, Fletcher repeated softly, and his eyes were bright. I like the sound of that. The weeks that followed were some of the best of Elena's life. The trial was over, the threat was gone, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she could simply exist without fear. She threw herself into the work of the ranch with renewed energy, learning everything Rowan and Fletcher could teach her about cattle, about the land, about the 1,000 small tasks that kept a place like this running. She also began to reclaim parts of herself she'd lost. She started riding out alone sometimes, just to feel the freedom of it. She planted a proper garden, thinking ahead to spring and summer harvests. She even started writing again, something she'd loved before Daniel died, but had abandoned in the grinding struggle for survival. And slowly, carefully, she and Rowan built something between them. It wasn't rushed or dramatic. There were no grand declarations or sweeping gestures. Instead, it was built in quiet moments, hands touching as they passed tools, conversations that stretched late into the night, the comfortable silence of 2 people who didn't need words to understand each other. One evening, about 3 months after the trial, they were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out when Rowan reached over and took her hand. I've been thinking, he said, about the future, about what I want this place to become. And what do you want? I want it to be more than just a ranch. I want it to be a place where people who've been broken down can come and heal, where someone running from a bad situation can find safety and work and a chance to start over. He looked at her. The way you did? Elena felt her throat tighten. That's a beautiful idea. I can't do it alone. Would take both of us, all 3 of us really, to make it work. But I think it matters. I think maybe that's what this place was always supposed to be, and I was just too caught up in my own grief to see it. Then let's do it. Let's build that. She squeezed his hand. We could start small. Maybe take on 1 or 2 people at first. People Fletcher hears about in town or that the sheriff knows about. Give them honest work, fair wages, a place to get back on their feet. You're sure? It won't be easy. Some of them will have hard stories, might bring their own trouble. I'm sure, because someone did it for me, and it saved my life. Now I want to do the same for someone else. But they started the next month with a young woman named Sarah, a coincidence that wasn't lost on either of them, who'd fled an abusive husband in New Mexico. She was quiet and skittish at first, jumping at loud noises, keeping to herself. But gradually, with patience and space and the steady routine of ranch work, she began to heal. Then came Marcus, a former slave who'd been freed, but had nowhere to go and no skills except the brutal work he'd been forced to do. Rowan taught him to work with horses, and Elena watched the man transform from someone who saw himself as property into someone who understood his own worth. After them came others. A boy whose parents had died in a cholera outbreak, a woman whose town had been destroyed by raiders, a man who'd lost everything in a fire and was rebuilding from nothing. Each of them brought their own pain, their own stories, and each of them found, on this rough patch of Texas ground, a place to heal and grow and become themselves again. The ranch transformed. Where there had been silence and solitude, now there was life. The sound of voices at meals, laughter from the bunkhouse Fletcher had helped build, the sense of community that came from people working together toward something bigger than themselves. Elena bloomed in this environment. She discovered she had a gift for seeing what people needed, for knowing when to push and when to give space. She became the heart of their small community, the one people came to with problems or fears, or just the need for a kind word. And through it all, she and Rowan grew closer. Their relationship deepened naturally, inevitably, until one spring morning she woke up and realized she couldn't imagine her life without him in it. They married in the fall, a year and a half after he'd pulled her from the dirt in Stillwater. It was a simple ceremony in the yard, with Fletcher standing as witness and all the people they'd helped gathered around. Sheriff Marcus came from Stillwater to officiate, And even some of the townspeople who'd turned their backs on Elena before made the journey to celebrate with her now. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel this again, Rowan told her as they stood together under the cottonwood tree he'd planted for Sarah and Emma years before. Didn't think I deserved to, but you showed me that life doesn't end just because it changes, that loving someone new doesn't mean forgetting someone old. Thank you for that, for giving me permission to live again. Thank you for showing me I was worth saving, Elena replied, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for teaching me that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. They kissed as husband and wife, and the small crowd cheered, and Elena felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever in that street in Stillwater. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing from a small operation to a respected community fixture. People came from all over the territory, drawn by stories of the place where broken people were made whole again. Some stayed, becoming permanent fixtures in their growing family. Others healed and moved on, carrying with them the knowledge that they were worth fighting for. Elena never forgot where she'd come from, never forgot the woman who'd lain in the dirt waiting to die, or the town that had looked away. But she didn't let those memories define her. Instead, she used them as fuel, as motivation to make sure no one else had to feel that alone or that worthless. She and Rowan had 3 children over the next several years, 2 daughters and a son. They raised them to be strong and kind, to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves, to understand that privilege carried responsibility. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the work was done and the children were asleep, Elena and Rowan would sit on the porch and remember how they'd started, how a moment of violence had led to a moment of courage, and how that courage had built something neither of them could have imagined alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked one such evening, her head resting on his shoulder. "Stopping that day in Stillwater? Taking on someone else's trouble when you had enough of your own?" "Never," Rowan said without hesitation. "That was the day my life started again. The day I stopped just surviving and started actually living. How could I regret that?" "I love you, Caleb Rowan. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." "I love you too, Elena. More than words can say." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Elena thought about all the people they'd helped over the years, all the lives they'd touched, all the second chances they'd given. She thought about Clayton Voss, growing old in a prison cell, and felt nothing but pity. He'd had everything: money, power, influence, and he'd wasted it on cruelty and control. While she, who'd been left with nothing, had built something that actually mattered. She thought about Daniel, her first husband, and sent him a silent thanks. He'd brought her west, given her the chance to become who she was meant to be, even if he hadn't lived to see it. She hoped he'd be proud of what she'd built. But mostly, she thought about the future, about the children sleeping inside, about the people who would come to them seeking help, about all the good they could still do with whatever time they had left. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan asked, feeling her smile against his shoulder. "I'm thinking that I should have died in that street, that by all rights I should be bones in an unmarked grave somewhere, forgotten and unmourned. But I'm not. I'm here, alive, happy, surrounded by people I love. And I'm thinking that every single day since you pulled me from that dirt has been a gift. An undeserved, precious gift. Not undeserved, never undeserved. Maybe not, but still precious." She lifted her head and kissed him, slow and sweet, a kiss that tasted of gratitude and love and the future they'd built together from the ashes of their separate pasts. And somewhere in the hills, a nightbird called, its song carrying across the darkness like a benediction. Elena Moore had been beaten, broken, and left for dead. She'd lost everything: her husband, her home, her hope. The world had told her she was worthless, disposable, someone who didn't matter. But she'd survived. More than survived, she'd thrived. She'd found love again, built a family, created something meaningful from nothing. And in doing so, she'd proven something important, something that every person who came to their ranch learned, whether they stayed a week or a lifetime, that no one was worthless, that everyone deserved a second chance, that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up, no matter how many times the world knocked you down. That survival wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Elena Moore had survived. And in surviving, she'd learned how to truly live. The ranch stood solid against the Texas sky, a testament to everything she and Rowan had built. Inside its walls and across its fields, people who'd been broken were learning to be whole again. People who'd lost hope were finding reasons to keep going. And at the center of it all, a woman who'd once lain dying in the street now stood tall and strong, proof that the human spirit could endure anything as long as it had someone willing to see its worth. She'd been saved by a stranger's courage. And now, every day, she paid that gift forward. That was justice. That was healing. That was how you won against the cruelty and indifference of a hard world. Not by becoming hard yourself, but by choosing every single day to be soft where it mattered, to be kind, to see people not as they appeared but as they could be, to stand up when everyone else looked away. Elena Moore had been knocked down, but she'd gotten back up. And in getting up, she'd shown others they could do the same. That was her victory. That was her triumph. That was her story. And it was far from over.